Good to be with you all on this Tuesday evening. We have quite a number of questions that have been sent in, so we'll start with those. My question is it possible to become addicted to real love and use it to vent? But if one does not or will not make a decision to use the information to change, then does it become enabling? And what is the loving thing to do in this case for coaches? Do they confront or patiently listen and allow it? Yes, it's possible to become addicted in an unhealthy way to the platform provided by real love. Real love itself is healthy, but many people don't use it in a healthy way. Churchill said, most people, when they stumble across the truth, dust themselves off and move on as if nothing had happened. And boy, does that characterize us most of the time. Learning is not just the acquisition of information, nor is real love simply an opportunity to learn new principles and techniques, or simply to vent, as you put it, about all the terrible things that are going on in our lives. Real learning is measured by change. If people claim to have learned something and they're not better in some way, then they really didn't learn anything at all. They just got a bunch of information. So when we know a thing, when we grow, we have an obligation to share that with other people and to help them do the same too. All of that involves genuine change. It means sometimes as a coach, risking the possibility that somebody might have their feelings hurt. It involves risking injuring somebody else. Now, when I say injuring, there's kind of a qualification there, because if people feel sufficiently loved, no matter what you say to them, it wouldn't injure them. But nonetheless, working as a coach, if we're not willing to participate in somebody experiencing pain, they're not going to grow. And so when you see somebody who just keeps venting on and on, telling the same stories, then as coaches we do have an obligation to help them see what their choices are, to see how they're behaving, to see how they're feeling, rather than just letting them go on and on. In fact, after somebody's gone on and on once or twice, that's enough. Then we need to help them distill it into what does it mean. So you are consistently choosing to what? To lie, to run away, to withdraw, to whatever. Okay, that's the pattern. Once you've established the pattern, you don't need to tell 20 versions of it. And you don't need to describe all the other things that people did that led to your withdrawal. No, you have a tendency to run. So we help people see the pattern of their behaviors and then help them, well, first to feel accepted by us while they're doing that, and then I recommend that we actually give people assignments. So over a period of the next 2 days, 10 days, whatever it is, what are you going to choose to do differently that will change this pattern in your life? And it's more than just, well, I'm going to buck up and quit it. That doesn't usually work very well. So will you, for example, call 4 people over the next 10 days? Will you tell them how you have run, lied, whatever it is, and expose yourself to an opportunity to feel unconditionally loved by them? You might want to make a gratitude list. Describe all the things in your life that are going well that you're grateful for. And as you feel grateful, as you remember the love that you already have, you'll be less likely to withdraw the next time something potentially difficult happens. Many assignments that can be made. But you're right. To just let somebody go on and vent is not helpful to them or anybody else listening. That's the next question. I would just recommend that if you've got little children in the room who are listening, because many parents listen to the video chats with their kids, it might not be suitable for kids under 18. You'll have to make that choice later. If you decide that it's suitable, then shoot. Let them watch the archive. And, of course, it's up to you now. I'm just making a recommendation. It's more of an adult question. So this viewer says, I have a question that's been bothering me and a bunch of other women, and I'm a little reluctant to ask. Maybe because I've never heard this discussed before. So the question is this. My husband does not feel as though he has had a completely satisfying sexual lovemaking experience unless I have at least one, if not multiple orgasms. I don't feel that way at all, and will often provide him an experience for just his own sexual release, although he still wants me to be involved in that. I feel like if I'm involved in providing pleasure, then it's a loving act on my part. It's become very challenging, as I don't often achieve an orgasm as quickly as he does, nor do I have as much of a sexual drive as he does. I don't want to lie to him and say that I had an orgasm if I didn't, but I'm beginning to feel a lot of pressure to perform, and I'm getting tired of him insisting on me achieving an orgasm. I have shared with him that it really is not important to me to achieve orgasm, to feel connected to him. I can enjoy his pleasure, which might include some of my own, without achieving sexual satisfaction of my own. Our sex life is one of the ways that he feels very connected to me. So it seems to me that he's not really concerned about my happiness, about whether or not I achieve an orgasm, but more so, it seems, to be tied to his ability to perform. In other words, he's getting a sense of power and praise. And I could be way off base here, which is why I'm writing about this. It's regrettable that in our society we have somehow partitioned sex off, kind of segregated it as like a completely different or separate part of life. It's not like anything else. It's often treated as a taboo. It's often, as little kids, we were taught that you only talk about it when you're giggling and huddled under a blanket, talking about it with your little friends. We've been learning this particular attitude from the time we were little children. So we think that the rules of sexual behavior are quite different from the rules of all other behavior. We're more reluctant to talk about it. And we have a greater emotional charge around it. It can be so much healthier to just consider that sex is one way of many to share love and experience pleasure between two people in a partnership. And the rules for it are really in many respects very similar to, often the same as, the rules for other behavior in a relationship. So let's imagine that your husband asked you to go to the movies with him, and you agree. But then he says, I really can't enjoy the movie unless you wear a yellow hat. Well, so what do? It's your choice how much you want to participate in his experience. So, do you want to go to the movie at all? Okay, maybe you do. Do you really want to wear a yellow hat to the movie? Well, do you have to? No, you don't. But if it's a big deal to him, you might choose to do that, if it's obviously a source of pleasure to him. But then you go to the movie with him, as he's asked, and in the yellow hat, and he says he wants to eat some popcorn. And he just can't tolerate the thought of eating popcorn alone. But you can't tolerate the thought of eating popcorn. Either it's not on your diet, or you hate popcorn, or whatever it is. You just can't do it. So now what? Do you, again, have to eat the popcorn? After all, you've accommodated him in going to the movie, wearing the yellow hat. Do you have to eat the popcorn? Absolutely not. So what would you do? You would sweetly and calmly explain that you look forward to the movie. You're enjoying wearing the yellow hat because you know that he enjoys it, if that's reason enough. But you just can't do the popcorn. You don't want to. So now he has a choice. He can enjoy the movie with all you've brought to it, you, the yellow hat, whatever, or he can reject your gift, be miserable because he insists on you eating popcorn with him, and ruin the entire experience. His choice. But no matter how mad he gets about it, you get to choose to do what you want to do. and you didn't cause his anger. After all, you even gave him a gift. You said you'd come. Another gift. You said you'd wear a yellow hat. Then you went, nah, I'm not going to do the popcorn. Now, this is pretty obvious. Anybody would say, well, sure, you get to refuse to eat the popcorn. Nobody should force you to eat something. Well, it's a similar thing with sex. You offer what you can, you offer what you choose, but you explain that you offer what you can freely. You further explain to him that, sometimes either you can't have orgasm because, sometimes you just don't feel like it. Sometimes it's just not possible. And don't lie about it. You say, tonight or today or whenever, I'm just not going to be able to achieve that. Or you don't really even want to get that involved in the entire experience. So you say, I'll have sex, but probably not going to have orgasm. Or I don't even want to have sex at all. But you can offer to him what you do have. You could say, I will offer you some form of sexual pleasure that would be a release for you. But I'm just not interested in the entire experience. I'm too tired. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what the reason is. In fact, you don't even have to provide one. You just say, I just really couldn't get into the whole thing. So, and then he has a choice. You say, here's what I do offer, and I offer it freely. I'd be delighted to do this for you. Then he has a choice. If he has a fit, it's his fit. If he says, well, I just can't enjoy it unless you have orgasm, well, you're not obligated to do that. And then if he wants to have a little fuss about it, let him have a little fuss. If he's annoyed, then it's kind of obvious that he's looking to gratify his own need for imitation love. In other words, he doesn't feel sufficiently worthwhile if you don't achieve ultimate pleasure. He may get some sense of power from being able to bring you to orgasm, for example. And that's his choice. He gets to do that. He gets to get whatever imitation love he wants to out of the experience, but that doesn't obligate you to do anything. So, just like pretty much with any kind of relationship, any kind of behavior, and that's why sex really isn't so different, you offer what you can offer freely. And gosh, if my partner isn't satisfied with what I offer freely, now that's his or her choice, isn't it? You just be sure that you always offer as much as you can lovingly, and then you don't feel pushed or obligated to do any more. If you feel pushed, you're going to have a miserable time. And if you have a miserable time enough times, you're not going to want to enjoy any sexual experience at all with him. And it's going to end up being to your detriment and his too. So anytime we go past our ability to be loving, we usually end up suffering, and so do the people around us. And if he fusses, you can't show any discomfort in that. You say, well, I regret that that's how you feel about it, that you're not happy, but this is what I offer you. If you show any pain, if you go, oh, well, that's exactly why he has a fit in the first place. It's why adults have fits. It's why children have tantrums. It's to ensnare or hook whoever they're with in an emotional way. Don't get involved in that, or he's going to feel even more justified in feeling like a victim. Enough of the 18 and up question. Here's a reader or viewer who says, I've been working with a man and his 22-year-old son in real love. The 22-year-old has been struggling since his parents divorced when he was 13 years old. He can't hold a job, and frequently he's finding new places to live because he's been kicked out of the last one. He's reaching out and making calls and attending a real love group. My question is, how can those who are trying to help him make changes in his life and love him and teach him to be responsible, how can they know that they're not enabling him to continue in his current behavior? His father has feelings of guilt from not teaching his son these things while he was younger, but he's torn with also teaching him to be responsible because he knows that brings happiness, being responsible does. Well, in the first place, how do you know whether you're enabling? If you feel obligated to do it, then it's not unconditionally loving. If he manipulates you and you respond just because he's manipulating you, then you're enabling him. If you consistently do things for him that he could be doing, then you're enabling him. So like, if he can't find a job and you go out and do all the work for him and you go out and find one, you're not helping him. But if you say, here's a number of somebody that you can call and you can use my name, that's just helping. You're requiring him to do most of the work. For example, I was helping a fellow who recently got out of prison to get a job. And rather than just go find him a job, which I suppose I could have done, what I did was I said, so what kind of work do you like to do? And then I showed him how to research on the internet, how to look for jobs. I took him through the steps. I showed him, you go to this website and that website, and here's how you navigate back and forth, and here's how you find jobs in this area with these incomes and with your skills. Then he said, well, I've done a lot of that. Sure, but then you need to keep doing more. And if you can't find a job that way, you may have to establish your own business. For example, have you ever done lawn care? Have you ever, well, a little bit in the past. And so we talked to him about how to establish his own lawn care business. And we helped him design some flyers and helped him print them up. And I sat with him, stood there in the living room and actually had him go outside our front door and knock on the front door and practice doing a door pitch. Where he says, hello, my name is, Fred, and I'm in your neighborhood, and here's what I offer, and here's what I charge. Here's a flyer that describes what I do. I had him actually practice that in front of me and help him with little things like, the way he didn't look at people in the eye, which would make people suspicious of him. The way he dresses, the way he speaks, he tends to mumble. I said, nobody's going to buy a service from you when you mumble. They figure you're hiding something. And so we practiced to the point where he felt more at ease, where he had the tools to go look for a job, the tools to create his own business. So we helped him up to a certain point and then said, now you have to go and do the rest, which he then did. So that's helping rather than enabling, which really, the whole idea of enabling is that we make them weaker by doing too much. And that's the thing to watch for. Now, about the father of the boy. He's feeling guilty because what he hasn't taught the boy, and you just need to go right and address that subject. So you really didn't teach him what he needed to know because he doesn't know how to look for a job. He doesn't know how to be responsible. He doesn't know how to support himself. Help the father tell the truth about it. I screwed up. I did not prepare my son for life, as opposed to hiding it and feeling bad about it. And then you let it go. I screwed up. I didn't do a good job of preparing my son, but I did the best I knew how to do with what I had at the time. So you can't go back and atone for the past. You can't make it go away. You can't make up for it. All you can do is love him and teach him in the present. And give the father some ideas about how to help his son find a job, find an apartment, and so on, without doing all the work for the kid. So you help the father tell the truth, you help him let go of the guilt, and then you help teach the father how to love and teach his son. That's an enormous help, as opposed to wallowing in the guilt and the grief and the enabling, and you should be able to at least begin making a difference with this boy and with his father. This viewer said, my coach said to me that in order for me to become the mother figure that my kids need, I need to leave the feeling of guilt behind and allow them to learn on their own, just like I'm learning on my own. It has helped me so much, and my relationship is better with them. Just a thought. Well, yes. What our children, it's brilliant what you're saying. What our children need most from us is love. You can't simultaneously feel guilty and unconditionally loving. Because if I'm wallowing in my own guilt, what kind of emotional energy do I have left over to unconditionally love you? Little to none. So guilt becomes actually crippling, not motivating. A little bit of guilt. Oh, hey, I screwed up. I don't want to do that again. That kind of guilt. Very useful. But anything past that, oh, I'm a terrible person. Oh, well, who are you helping with that? Anytime I spend saying I'm a terrible person, I'm wasting. I could be spending loving and teaching my children. So, way to go. This viewer says, this is my first contact or reaching out for a real love contact, and I want to get this thing off my chest. The first time I've talked about this. Last week I ate a late lunch of lean cuisine, all healthy, but then while I was cleaning out my car I found this nutty trail mix, so I started eating it and I ate the whole thing. But then I made it worse. I got some ice cream and ate the whole carton. I was so sick about it that I made myself throw up, literally throw up, like as in bulimia. But I still don't feel better and feel bad about making myself get sick and also for mindlessly eating food that I know will make me feel bad. I've been making myself sick when I've overeaten since my early 20s. In the early days, it worked for weight loss. It also gave me a feeling of empowerment or a high in a weird way. Let me pause just to say that this is a very common pattern with anorexics and bulimics. Their lives feel out of control. They don't feel cared for. They don't feel loved. They can't control anything else in their lives. But they can control what goes in and out of their bodies. And boy, if that's the only kind of control you've got, anorexics and bulimics use this for a feeling of power and safety. Nothing else is working, but they can at least utterly control what they eat and how thin they are. That's quite a feeling of power and does become a kind of high, artificial high. You continue. That is no longer the case. It doesn't work at all now because my metabolism is so screwed up that no matter how hard I try, it's difficult to lose any weight. Now I'm just mindlessly doing and mindlessly reacting. I know if I could stop this cycle, it would be the way to start healing both my mental state from doing it, but also building up my metabolism where it should be again so I can eat healthy and feel good about it. Eating bad makes me feel bad about myself, not like the great feeling I get when I feel loved. Does some part of us want to sabotage that feeling of goodness? No. I hear this all the time. I hear that we sabotage ourselves when we're feeling too good. No, nobody feels genuinely happy and loved and then says, I think I'll screw that up. Yeah, I don't really like this feeling. Nobody does that. But they do get to a place where they're experimenting with the feeling of being unconditionally loved and genuinely happy, and then they get the thoughts or temptations of going back to the old ways of behaving and experiencing the immediate rewards of praise, power, pleasure, safety, and then we fail, we stumble. And so we've been living the old way, earning imitation love, using getting and protecting behaviors for so long that we just get to moments where we lose our faith in something that's new, something with which we're not nearly as familiar. And as soon as we become afraid, we tend to do not what's right, we tend to do what we know. And that's why we go back to doing the stupid stuff. It's not to sabotage that we feel good, it's just that the feeling of being loved will wane for just a little bit, and then we become frightened, and boom, we go back to something we can duplicate, which is the old silly behaviors. You said I've never talked about this before, and way to go that you're talking about it now. It's a big thing. I want to quit, but I keep doing what's bad for me. I don't even know why I went to the bad food today to begin with. I was feeling good about myself and happy, and you probably were feeling happier, better than usual, but then you saw that old source of imitation love. There was that bag of trail mix and that old feeling of being physically full, of feeling instantly gratified, just overwhelmed you. You were relatively weak in real love, so your faith in real love was like this big, and along came a temptation that was twice that size, and you folded. This happens. And so what can we do about it? Practice finding the genuine thing, real love, enough that our faith grows to the point like this, so that when a temptation comes along the same size, it doesn't bother us anymore. We have enough experience and familiarity with the real thing that we're not tempted by the old thing anymore. You said it's just a mindless habit. I don't know what I should have done. Maybe reached out before I made myself sick and just tried to live through the sick feeling with another real love person on the phone. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, feeling loved is always better, and we just need to establish a more regular pattern of feeling unconditional love so that we trust it more, so we have more of it available to us when the old temptations come around. It's become so normal to me that even after I overate, I was thinking of having a positive real love call just to say how good my day is. Then I realized that I couldn't be truly seen unless I said what really happened. I would have been ignoring the negative in my life and just showing to you guys the positive, which isn't the purpose of all this. I want to be seen and tell the truth so I can be accepted and loved, and through that figure out a way to heal. And that's why just simply mouthing positive affirmations is not enough. Sure, it's good to have a positive attitude, and it's fine to talk about the successes in our life. But it's not the successes in our life that cause us to stumble and bawl and literally pitch ourselves off the cliff. We have to talk about the things that are obstacles. We can't just say everything is fine. We have to be seen for who we really are. Not to wallow in negative feelings. Oh, I feel worthless. No. Just to simply talk about our negative choices so that we can see them, so that wiser choices become available to us, and so that we can feel loved while we're making less than positive choices. So hence the importance of making phone calls and connecting to people. This viewer says, I'm 39 and my boyfriend has been living with me for a little over 2 years. I started having a problem with him a few months after he moved in when he told me, I read in the Bible that sex before marriage is wrong. I was excited. I thought he was saying that we were going to get married. That'd be one way to interpret that. 2 years later, I saw that we were not talking about marriage or even moving in the direction of marriage. So, see, you waited 2 years to figure this out. And in almost all relationships, people wait far too long to get clarity. Now, that doesn't mean make a demand, you have to marry me, but at least say, so, where are we going in this relationship? What's happening? And why do we put it off? Because we're afraid. We're afraid of what we might hear. So rather than hear something negative, we prefer to hear nothing. And then everything gets worse because we're not basing our relationship on a foundation of the truth, which requires that we talk about things. So at some point, we have to ask relatively early. I mean, if you've been dating somebody for more than 3 or 4 months, that's a long time, unless you're 16. But once you get into an adult, age old enough where you're where you want to form a permanent relationship, after 3 or 4 months, and in many cases sooner, it's time to say, where do you see our relationship going? Or with even more bravery, say, here's where I see it going. Do you see it going in the same direction? Don't just leave it to your partner to say it. I mean, say it straight out. What are our goals together? And goodness, by the time you've been living with somebody, if you're not being serious about where your relationship's going, you're living in a dream. But you were afraid to talk to him. And so you waited, and my guess is that it gets worse. You continue. So I asked him about us, finally, after 2 years. And he said this. We and you have a lot of work to do before we could possibly take that step. He told me that I'm too negative and moody, that I need to get rid of all my issues, and then we can get married. That would be nice. I was so hurt by this. I felt that he was wrong to say that. If he really loved me, he would not have said that. I've been reading a lot of books, but I became hurt and a little angry at him, so I told him to move out and think about what he wants for me and with me. Do you think I was right to have him move out due to his statement about how I should change for him? I want to change for me in my own time. So, honey, no criticism intended here. It's pretty clear that if you waited for 2 years to ask him this question and had no clue what the answer was going to be, you don't know how to be in a committed relationship. You didn't even know how to talk to him. So, was it right that you had him move out? Yes, but not for the reasons you think. It was best to have him move out, not because he was unkind, we'll get to that in a minute, but because you don't know how to be in an intense, committed, mutually sharing, unconditionally loving relationship. And you need to learn how to do that before you've just thrown yourself literally into one. I mean, where you're living with a guy. Way too much to do before you know how to handle a relationship. So, what could you do? You could learn a great deal more about real love. You can read the books, participate in the conference calls, watch the DVDs, whatever, and expose yourself to more opportunities to feel unconditionally loved by other women before you even think about a serious committed relationship with a man. You're just not ready for one, not just with him, but with anybody. Now, was he unkind? To say, you're moody, well, he may have been unkind in his delivery, I don't know, but he's supposed to set standards for a relationship. Anybody who's looking for a permanent partner should say, let's see, in order for me to be in a permanent relationship with somebody, first they need to define the standards for themselves. I need to know how to be unconditionally loving. I need to be relatively stable and not moody and depressed and angry. Then, what do I want in a partner? I want a partner who can be truthful about himself, who can admit that he's wrong, who's interested in an unconditionally loving relationship. You should have standards like that. If you don't, you're just stupid. I mean, then you'd just be throwing a dart into a phone book and picking whoever the dart hits. Not smart. So you need to have standards, and that's what he's telling you. He's saying, the person that I marry would need to be less moody, less angry, less like you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to conform to those standards. Not at all. He's just saying, I've got to have a partner that possesses these characteristics. Now, he probably doesn't have those stable characteristics either, so it's probably hypocritical on his part. And he was wrong, dead wrong, not so much in the way he told it to you, but he was dead wrong to wait this long to tell you. I mean, it should have been pretty obvious to him that you were interested in a serious, long-term relationship. At least, hopefully you were giving out at least those vibrations, rather than, well, we two are just ships passing in the night for 2 years. So long before then, he should have communicated to you what he wanted in a partner. But he didn't know how, or he was afraid to, or whatever. But that was just as much your responsibility as his. So again, this entire story that you're telling me really confirms that neither of you is ready. Not only for this relationship, but for any long-term relationship at this point. Here's a viewer that says, I want to be happy for my children. Instead, I hear one daughter call her partner sweetie, adult daughter, and I just cringe because I know their relationship is awful and that she's just pretending. I hear my future daughter-in-law talk about designing Converse tennis shoes for her wedding with my son, and I cringe. I hear her future husband, my son, filled with doubt about going ahead with this marriage, but going ahead with it anyway, and I cringe. I look at my other daughter, my third child, and I can't understand how she has almost vegetated at home for the past year doing nothing. No job, no help around the house, living with us, doing nothing, and again, I cringe. How do I let go of wanting things to be different from how they are? How do I smile and be supportive of choices that I know are not going to lead to their happiness? I'm guessing that the reason that I can't just be happy for them is because I have my own idea of what's best for them. Yeah, I'm sure you do. But it's okay to have an idea about what would make them happier. That's okay. Not about specific things like, gee, you ought to be a doctor instead of a lawyer, but, you know, because you've been around long enough, you're wise enough to know that, for example, marrying somebody that you're already having regular fights with and doubts about is going to work out badly 99% of the time. So that would be stupid. You're aware that a daughter lying around and doing nothing and having no responsibilities and not getting a job and not helping around the house for a year, that's not going to lead to happiness. So it's not wrong to have a concept of what makes people happy, which would apply to your children as well as to anybody else. That's okay. What's wrong is your need to have them change and actually become like you want. It's okay to have a concept of what's happier, but you have a timetable for them to follow that pattern, to do what you want. Not okay, because we don't know, when we look at anybody, what they're capable of hearing in a given moment, how quickly they're able to learn and grow. And so having a timetable for them and insisting that they do it in any way, in other words, expressing disappointment or annoyance when they don't, that becomes counterproductive all the time, both to them and to us. So, what is all right? We'll talk more about that in a minute. You continued. If I looked out and saw one of my children playing on the interstate in the middle of rush hour, I couldn't be happy for them. So, how do you feel happiness for them, knowing that they're putting themselves right smack in the middle of situations that are potentially as dangerous as playing on the freeway? And you're right, our emotional playing on the freeway can be just as harmful as physically doing it. I feel like my happiness for them would be a sign of approval. So if I'm happy for them, I'm afraid that they'll believe that I approve of their behaviors. I'm guessing that my happiness might be just what they need, though, My happiness for them would be one less burden for them to carry. What they always need, your children always need to feel your support and your unconditional acceptance, your love, where you really accept them, not just where you talk about it. They can feel it when we love them, and they feel it when we don't. Now, that does not mean approving of what they do. So, how would they know the difference? You unconditionally love and support them, and then occasionally you teach them. Now, let me give you some examples. You gave the example of your daughter who's having the miserable relationship, but she calls her partner sweetie. All right, so there will be times when she looks like she's miserable. Most of the time, you just need to love and support her and say nothing. But on particular occasions, when it's just the two of you and she's looking miserable, you might ask her on those occasions, how are you feeling? Or, gosh, it looks like you're not particularly happy today. And then really listen to her when she talks about how she's feeling. I mean, listen till she's done, as opposed to listening for 3 sentences so you can jump in and correct her. No, really listening to her. And then, occasionally, after you've really listened, saying things like, have you noticed that when you do blank, you're more unhappy? Or have you noticed that there are any times when you are happy? And have you noticed what behaviors are associated with happiness? In other words, help give her little clues so that she can help identify what is going on in her life that leads to the unhappiness and what leads to the moments of peace and satisfaction in her life. And does she confuse being happy with just getting what she wants from her partner? Then at some point you might even say to her, would you be interested in some observations that I had that might help you become free of just being happy only when situations are good? Then if she says, well, yeah, I'd be interested in, an observation or two, then you share maybe 1 or 2 observations. And emphasize that at any point, if she doesn't want to hear any more, all she has to do is say something. And you have no attachment to whether she listens to you. Kids can tell when you have an agenda. If you're like, no, now, let me tell you something. They're not going to want to hear that. You said you have a son who's about to marry a woman, and even though they're having an unhappy relationship and lots of doubts, same thing. When he looks unhappy, you tell him, I'm going to support you no matter what you do. If you get married, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be at the wedding with bells on. I'm going to sing. But I do know that some things, if they're not worked out beforehand, before you get married, they tend to just only get worse. Things like being right, controlling, being angry. Because once two people are married, they feel like they own their partner. And now the expectations multiply. And once you have more expectations, whoa, bigger disappointment, bigger anger, bigger controlling, worse everything. And you just share that with him. And you say, if this is helpful to you, fine. If you don't want to hear it, then I don't have to tell it to you. Similar with the daughter lying around the house. She needs to be taught and loved. Sweetie, I'm going to love you no matter what you do. But it's obvious that with your lying around the house, you're not as happy as you could be. When people are responsible and out on their own and doing what they need to do, they're simply happier. So I'm willing to give you a reason to learn. Gosh, if she's being supported, fed, and diapered by you at home, why should she go out and do anything? You're taking care of everything for her. This is the enabling that we were talking about earlier. So you might, for example, say, you can have 2 more months here where you'll be supported with no conditions, but by blank date, November 12th, I'm making this up. You do whatever you want, but it's just a suggestion. It's one other possibility. You don't have to do a thing to make me happy. But by November 12th, on November 12th, you will have to have your own place. Whether you have a job is up to you. You could not get a job, and then they have I understand some openings in some of the finer homeless shelters in the area. But it's up to you what you do. It's just that we won't continue to support your not doing anything, because what we're doing is perpetuating it. And I care enough about you to tell you that by that date you have to be gone. And if that means she lives with friends, in a shelter, gets a tent and camps out in a state park, that's up to her. Lots of ways to go. People find them all over the planet. But you're not going to finance her irresponsibility anymore. So through all of this, understand that you can identify things that would work better for your children, but you can't be attached to what they do. You don't know how quickly they learn. So it's not like you're stifling your opinion. Oh, I'm not going to tell them what they... No, you don't have one. I tell my kids, I'm not smart enough to tell you what to do, and I'm not pretending. I'm not. I can tell you some things that consistently lead to less happiness in people, but I'm not going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to love you no matter what you do. This viewer says, since I've moved back to Boston, my mom has established the following pattern with me. She'll say to me regularly things like this. Susie, why don't I come over to your apartment for an hour before my hair appointment or whatever it is, and help you with X, Y, and Z. This is her way of offering to squeeze me into her busy schedule. It makes me feel small, used, and unimportant. I need your advice about what I can say to my mother to get my point across without offending her. I appreciate her help, but what I really want is for her to want to spend time with me rather than squeeze me into her schedule. That's really how she sees me, as somebody she feels obligated to help, and it makes her feel good to help me. What do you think? As a frame of reference, my brother visited my parents with his 2 young daughters for the past 2 weeks, and my mother dropped everything in her schedule to attend to him and his kids. So it sounds as though, and the odds of this are very high, that your brother has more to offer to trade with your mother in the way of imitation love. Very likely that she sees attending to a man as more important, more worthwhile than attending to a woman. He has 2 children, and so he brings over relatively unspoiled grandchildren who will adore everything she does. Whereas the adults in her life see through this manipulative offer of service for adoration. and she doesn't get as much imitation love in return from adults. So she uses children to feel better about herself. And because he has more to offer in the way of imitation love, well, she's willing to do more for him. He gives more, she gives more. For whatever reasons, and gosh, there can be a long list, you just don't have as much to offer in terms of imitation love. Well, so what? Does that mean you want to start giving more imitation love? Well, that's not going to work. You just accept her. You realize that this woman is offering you what she has. Now, how do you get across to her that she's doing this to you? I release you from any obligation to do that and suggest that you not even try. You try to tell your own parents that they have not been unconditionally loving you, and that conversation will go well 1 in 1,000 times. So don't start. You just accept that she's doing what she can do. She's been doing it all her life, which is, twice as long as yours. And the likelihood that you'll say something and she'll go, oh, wow, thanks for showing me that. I'll quit that right now. Are zero. So why go down that road? Accept what she offers. Be grateful for any attempt she makes to care about you, even if it's tainted with imitation love, even if it's conditional, even if it's not exactly what you want. And then you make a decision exactly how much of it you want to accept. So when she says, I'm going to come over, and you determine whether you want her to come over as long as she says, whether you'd like it to be shorter. But to demand it to be longer will be, nothing but frustrating, because you're asking her to be more than what she is. And if you can do that, if you can see her in a different way as doing her best and simply take it, oh, wow, what a relief. Such a relatively effortless pleasure it becomes. Here's a man who says, I work as a coach at a university, and for years we've always talked about expectations to our players. Part of me feels like it's our job as their coaches to expect their best or to hold them to a high standard. But on the other side, since I've read the Real Love book and begun practicing real love, part of me feels like this isn't the most loving thing to do to our players. I know that it may be different for a coach-player relationship, but if you have any insight on how I can incorporate real love principles in my relationships with my players, I would be grateful. For a long time, it's been relatively accepted that in order to get the best out of an athlete, you have to drive them, whip them, yell at them, shame them, beat them, scream. And you see this in movies all the time. And you see it on the sidelines. You see these coaches screaming at their players. But I can tell you that even though that may work in the short term, the very best coaches love their players. I watched an old interview from some all Hall of Fame coaches, Red Auerbach, Joe Gibbs from the Redskins, really old, experienced, and very successful coaches, among the most successful coaches who ever lived. And somebody asked them, they said, so what did you do different? And there were 4 of them, and I can't remember who the other 2 were. But these 4 coaches sat around and kind of mumbled and went, I don't know. Until finally Red Auerbach, who always had a big fat cigar in his mouth, he puffed on his cigar and he said, I've got it. He said, all I did was love he used an expletive, the SOBs. It was actually worse than that. All I did was love them. And the other coaches, all of them went, whoa, that's it. That's what I did too. That's what motivated them. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't teach them. Of course they did. And they said, you have to do this, and you have to do this. And sort of by the way, because it is a contract, we're contracting to either pay you or contracting to give you a scholarship. And in order to keep your scholarship, your performance has to be X. So I'm going to love you and teach you, and I'm not going to beat you and make you feel bad. But you also need to understand that if you're not performing, there are 4 guys who want your position. And so a natural consequence if you're not performing is one of those guys would get your position. So I'm just going to tell you that at the beginning of the year, once. Don't need to beat you with it. And then I'm going to motivate you by just genuinely caring about you. We will kill ourselves for somebody who loves us. Really. More than we will for somebody who's yelling at us. Now, yeah, we might move faster for a few minutes when we're yelled at, but not in the long term. One of the most successful football coaches presently has worked in the NFL, worked in college for years, is presently the head football coach for the University of Southern California for the Trojans. Name is Pete Carroll. And other coaches will scream at their players and shout at them and shame them. And Pete Carroll says, I just believe that if we can bring out the best in who they are, that they'll perform better. He has the highest winning percentage of any active coach in the NCAA presently alive. He has a motto called "Win Forever." It's very clever, because it's not just win this game, but it's establish a kind of character where you're always winning. Oh, that is so sweet. And he has 5 kind of basic columns that support that philosophy. And one of them is to respect everybody. He says, treat everybody in the program with respect, as well as your opponents, the officials, the fans, each other. And he does that with his players. You see him laughing and smiling, and when something goes bad, he doesn't storm and kick and scream at players, because players who are loved perform better. Does that mean that we can't establish standards? Oh, no. No, if you're going to succeed in this game, here's some things you have to do. You have to make this block. You have to catch this ball. You have to, one of his major tenets is to protect the ball. You don't fumble the ball or throw interceptions, because it really changes the momentum of the game. But if you screw up, we're going to teach you how to do it better rather than make you feel bad about yourself. So there are standards set. That's a kind of expectation, but the love given is not conditional. It's the love that matters, and he pours that on his players, and wow, the results are spectacular. They've been to 2 or 3 national championships, maybe more than 3, since he took over the program, which was only 8 years ago, and they've won 2 national championships. Not bad results, huh? Here's a woman who says, recently I was diagnosed with an endocrine disorder, a disorder of the glands, which is, like thyroid, adrenals, that sort of thing. When I first started having symptoms, I did extensive research and determined with near certainty that I had a certain disease. But the doctors would not listen to me, and the initial tests came back negative, which made the doctors feel like they were right. Well, eventually it turned out that I did have what I suggested. I had what I thought, but that took a year of testing, 2 endocrinologists, a trip to a specialist across the country, all to figure it out. When I finally got the diagnosis last week, the correct diagnosis, I felt immediate relief. But then it occurred to me, the relief was not only the result of finding resolution to a year-long struggle, it was the comfort and security and power I gained in knowing that I was right. All this time, I needed to be right because I needed to feel safe. I needed to feel in control. As long as I buried myself in research and gained knowledge about my condition, I felt safe knowing that I was driving the process. My biggest fear was becoming too sick to reach the finish line. And to ensure that that never happened, I controlled every possible person and thing around me. I never saw that before. Despite my realization, I'm still thinking and acting like a victim. I have the urge to go to these doctors and show them I was right. They were wrong, and I was not crazy. I actually feel justified in any embarrassment or hurt I might cause them because, as I see it, they hurt me first. This is a victim's perspective. You're right. And is certainly not productive. I realized the doctors who dismissed me were not deliberately trying to hurt me. They just missed something. They made a mistake, may have even been drowning, and I happened to be the person that they inadvertently splashed. But I still act the injured party. How can I stop thinking this way and let go of the resentment? So, did you have a need to be right? Yeah. And really got a lot out of it and are still getting something out of it, or you wouldn't keep doing it. And some of that actually helped you, which is tricky, because by insisting on finding the cause, you actually turned out, you helped yourself physically. But you can undo all the benefits that you get from being treated physically correctly by being emotionally screwed up and insisting on power and safety and pleasure and praise and all that stuff that comes from being right. So what do you ask yourself? The question's pretty simple. In any given situation, do I want to be genuinely loving and therefore truly happy, or am I willing to sell my happiness for a cheap thrill of power, control, wanting to be right? That simple question has changed my behavior more times than I can count. Can you think of justifications for being right? Oh, yes, honey. They did it to me first. He really is a butthead. They shouldn't have blah, blah, blah. You can come up with a million. And if you do it in a balance sheet, you can come up with all kinds of reasons, 20, 30 reasons to be right. But on the other side is that single question. Will this make me genuinely loving and truly happy? Or will it just give me a temporary excitement? Oh, come on. Being right, no matter how fun it is for a moment, after you picture yourself, for example, stomping into the doctor's office and saying, "See, I went to the Mayo Clinic," or whatever it was, and they showed me that I had exactly what I told you that I had. And you'd walk out with this feeling of self-righteousness that would just blow up the moon. And then what? You'd stay mad all the rest of the day. You might even tell a bunch of people, "Let me tell you what I told that doctor." Would you feel peaceful? Would you feel caring, sensitive, kind, loving, truly happy? Impossible. Just in asking the question, you go, "Nah, that's pretty dumb." So that doesn't mean you have to stop it. You can be right all you want to. You just have to keep asking, will this make me loving and happy? And if I ask that question over and over again, I can't keep doing the stupid things. The only times that I've ever been able to continue in doing the stupid thing is if I quit asking the question. I just put the question away and I go, "I'd rather be right." Oh, go for it. I'll never stand in your way. If you want to go ahead and stomp on the doctor's heads, go for it. But you're not going to like the results. So why do it now? It's kind of like if you had a flat tire and your car pulls over to the side of the road and you had a flat tire just yesterday and you're mad at the car and you're mad at the world because, well, dang it, it's not fair that you should have two flat tires in a row. You could certainly take it out on your car. You could pull out a gun and shoot your car full of bullets. And for a moment, you'd feel really good. You would. Here was this car that had victimized you, the center of the universe, and you get back at it. After all, using your reasoning, the car did it to you first, and so you pull out a gun and you blow it full of holes. Now what? Now you have a car full of holes, and you're not a bit further ahead. And that's what real love does for you. Repairs the real wounds, which is not feeling loved. Gives us what we really need and allows us to be happy for a lifetime, as opposed to just temporarily satisfied or excited or pleased. Those are all cheap substitutes. So just keep asking, what am I willing to sell my soul for? Cheap thrills or the real thing? And you'll find, wow, you'll make better decisions. So we've had quite a series of outstanding questions, which I just love, and I encourage you to send in more. Feel free to write me at greg@reallove.com. Check out twitter.com, where you'll see that we've got a site there. And sign up to go look at the tweets that are posted every day or so. In the meantime, we look forward to seeing you next week. And remember that it's always about real love. See you then.